and welcome to Vickynomics, the economics of Victoria 3. I'm Mikael Anderson. I'm the lead game designer.
And I'm Paul Depre. I'm the QA lead for Victoria 3. And I also happen to have a background in economics, or more specifically, economic history.
Yeah, very useful, not at all terrifying for a designer to have your QA have that sort of background. Let's start off with a quote from Queen Victoria herself. Give my people beer, cheap beer and good beer, and you shall have no revolution among them. And we'll see in a moment how that's relevant to the discussion of economics in Victoria 3. So let's start off talking about scale, because scale is something that this game is pretty well known for, and the expectations are very high here.
Yes, it is a grand scale of the game. At the time, if I recall correctly, it's around 1 billion people.
Yeah.
And that is, most of those people will be in a subsistence-based economy, as we call it in the game. So that is, your people are working as farmers or are not in an industrialized workplace.
Right.
Or using those tools to those means.
Yeah. And the population and economic output, the GDP, that's split over 750 states and 140 different markets at game start.
Yes, and you can expect that those markets will change as time is, with the time period, markets consolidated and grew in strength. And within those markets, representing that economic output, we will see around 50 goods that are traded and produced through your buildings, and those aren't one-to-one.
Right, because some. So let's start talking about production and consumption then, right? So.
Yes.
The buildings are really the core economic unit, maybe in the game. So they're the ones that they can consume goods, but they mostly produce goods and sell goods to pops and to each other and so on, right? So the player will be expanding these.
Yes, there's the basic kind of building that is most known is your resource gathering or extraction base. In beginnings with subsistence-based economy, this will be mostly farms, agriculture output, basic industries. Later with technology, it can be oil and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Those goods will feed into the more industrialized buildings, that which produce a middling or a sort of end good that your people will consume.
Right. So those manufacturing or manufacturing industries, that's really what the era is well known for, right? Like the textile mills, steel mills, food industries, et cetera, et cetera. That
Yes, this period is known for the sort of rapid industrialization of Europe and the world as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is where a lot of profits can be made, of course, if you have access to the right resources. You can manufacture the right kind of products, either for your own consumption or for export, right?
Correct.
So consumption for yourself, this is the pops. Now, if you've watched the Welcome to Victoria panel, you will know what pops are. But suffice to say, that's what we call the unit of population. So when we talk about pops, we talk about people,
Yes.
right? So the people that are working your country, that constitutes your country, really, they are also the ones that are forming the basis for consumption in this economy, right?
Correct. Those pops will work in buildings, and they will then be, by that employment, gain money to buy the goods of which they work.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you will be expanding industry that's profitable, therefore creating better jobs for your people and producing goods that they need, making those goods cheaper. And that's kind of the core loop of the game. But you were mentioning before, it isn't like one trade good, one building.
No.
Because there's other building types too, right? Like that form different or that serve different purposes in the game.
No, it's not just important to be making goods for your market. Production is only one part of one side of the coin. You must also get those goods to market. And that is where you play with infrastructure, and that has a set of affecting prices in market, or basically the distribution of goods. In the early time periods, a single dirt country road might be enough for your small farming base to send its goods to market.
Yeah.
But as you grow and you industrialize, you will have to have an infrastructure that reflects that, such as railroads and giant port cities, etc.
And natural features as well,
Yes.
right? Like rivers and maybe mountains blocking the path and things like that. That also has an impact on at least the early economy of
Yes.
where it makes sense to build these big factory towns and whatnot.
And the early time, geographical location played a heavy role in settling where markets were and how trade and communication was handled. The rivers are your original highways and your original railways.
Right. But yeah, so railways, that's an example of a building that you will be able to build then as time goes on. So railways and ports are the two primary infrastructure buildings. Yeah, so you were saying that it's important to bring goods to market using infrastructure. So how does that work exactly?
What it works is infrastructure is produced, let's say, by your buildings, the railroad, your roads, and the sort of natural infrastructure of your region.
Yep.
And what happens is there's a capacity limit. It's an understanding. The roads can only hold so many people and so many goods.
Yep.
And that is modeling goods going to market, but also importantly, goods coming from a market.
Right.
So it's not only important that your goods can go to a market, but if your pops don't have access to the goods,
Yeah.
they're suffering adversely for that. And it's reflected in prices and market access and such things.
So you can expect then that in the early game, in kind of isolated states, you would have more of a local economy that's maybe agricultural based and things like that. And as the game goes on, and you can actually build out these railroads and infrastructure properly, then you can both extract more resources from those places and get more customers.
Yes,
really.
Infrastructure helps connect the production and consumption throughout your national market.
Yep. So yeah, obviously, very, very important part of the era is connecting the world closer together. But the railways and the ports, they are buildings also. So they employ people, they consume goods, right? So if you can't produce the locomotives yourself, then you're going to have to import them from someone else, and so on, right?
Correct.
And markets, you were saying, there's 140 markets, I said at game start. And over time, these might merge or you might get larger conglomerations of markets.
Yeah, it is a natural instinct over time for markets to merge together. It's sort of the rules of supply. It makes it easier to supply large groups and to have the demand localized in some form of national understanding. And in game, it's reflected in that is in the beginning, your markets are mostly centered around your nation or the regions of your nation,
right.
In that, and then may later come to understand a more common market, or if you use the term the Commonwealth market, which everyone is aware of for the time period. But these markets are basically just the area of exchange for your people producing goods, bringing them to market, and consuming the goods that they need. In simplest terms, the market will give a summary of supply and demand. And that, to the player, comes across as price. And price is sort of the everything.
Yeah, right.
It's the way to tell at a glance how things are going.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because prices truly is everything in this game, right? Like if grain is worth £1 more somewhere, that could actually have a huge impact, right? Price is determined by supply and demand. And as we mentioned before, if you don't have the infrastructure to bring all your goods to market, your price might be adversely impacted because you have this local overproduction. Which is going to be beneficial for the people consuming those goods locally, but detrimental overall, and especially for the consumers of that good, right?
Yes. Within the game, it is very much a double-edged sword. When prices are high, it's benefiting one part of your society as opposed to the other. The producers benefit from high prices, but the consumers don't. And they may tell you that and be upset about it.
Yeah. So there's no such thing really as like, this is a good price, which this is a design dilemma for sure, because trying to signal to the player that the price is too high here, there's no such thing as too high. It benefits one part of the population, but not the other.
Yeah, all pricing is relative and all benefits are relative of that.
Yeah. So you kind of have to decide, but it's obviously if your country is, or your market for that matter, if your market is consuming a lot of sulfur, it's bad for you if the price of sulfur is high, because your local economy is going to suffer from that.
Your local economy, especially if you don't produce sulfur domestically, you are then caught to the trials and tribulations of the diplomatic scene. And you can be cut off from your supplies. Your economy can collapse because of that. Price has not only a domestic but an international consequence.
Which ties in with availability, right? Because the different, you were mentioning before, resources exist in states. So different states have potential for different kinds of resources. So iron mines can only be built in some states and can only be built especially large in certain states. Certain resources like oil can only be discovered and can only be found found later in the game and only in specific states, right? And the people controlling those states are going to have an advantage. So access to the resources are going to shape the kind of strategy that you have going forward, and also make you a target potentially.
Potentially so. You may find that if you don't have a large military or any friendly allies, and you are sitting on the abundance of recently discovered oil or any other resource that produces of coal, iron, those basic things that fuel what we understand with industrial production, you will put a target on your back. So you either need to play nice or speak softly and carry a big stick then.
No, precisely. So another facet, we talked about this a little bit before, was the customers, right?
Yes.
So the customers are, or the consumers are, both the buildings. So buildings can consume, for example, like a tooling workshop can consume wood and iron, and making tools from that. But predominantly, the consumption comes from pops, right?
Yes. Pops buy their consumer goods through sort of a basket, as we've termed. That term has actually been around in economic literature from around this time period. And that basket of goods is pretty understandable when it's the lower stratas. It's, I need to eat.
Right.
I need the clothing on my back. I need the basic furnishings of life, and to satisfy those everyday needs. Now, this is also the period of progress and gaining of wealth, and so your pops can go beyond that.
Right. You can have this huge impact from just like not having had a textile mill in your state, and suddenly there's a factory that pumps out clothes so that you don't have to weave your own clothes.
And not only pumps out clothes, but pumps them out cheaply. So that actually means that your pops are spending less on their basic necessities.
Right. And so what happens if pops have, they expect a certain standard of living, they have a certain wealth, and suddenly prices plummet of the goods that they need. Suddenly they have, or for that matter, the factory they work in or the industry they work in start paying them more. For whatever reason. Then they will have money left over. This will go towards having even greater demands, right? And getting greater needs. So there are different kinds of professions in the game. So what's the difference between like what a laborer would eat and what an aristocrat would consume?
Your laborer is not going to be the pickiest. They have the very simple needs of, I must eat some food. I need to meet my basic needs. Those needs will be dependent upon what you can supply in the market. If you're a coastal-based country, you can probably supply them with some form of fish. If you are not, you're probably going to be reliant upon some basic grain and goods of that. Of course, as you move up in the classes, you get pickier about what you're wanting. You want the finer things in life. Your middle class will want cigars, tobacco, some form of tobacco product, liquor, something that reflects their status. And your aristocrats, well, they want the most luxurious items, that which come from, it could be the silks from China, it can be porcelain,
Right. So it's not just like things that you're manufacturing locally, but they might demand like these luxurious, exotic goods.
Yes. The more wealth your pops have, the more extravagant they become in their demands of consumption. So as you grow your economy and you grow the wealth of your pops, your economy will naturally have to change, or you are going to start importing more goods and be reliant upon others because consumption naturally goes this way.
Right. So this is a problem. If you can't keep up with, suddenly your aristocrats start demanding a lot of fruit, and you don't have any way of getting locally grown fruit, and now you're dependent on this other country, and you're actually propping up the economy of these other countries that produce fruit, right? So the benefit, though, of having this increase in demands is that as pops increase in their standard of living, they become more loyal to the state. Things are going well. They're happy. So the country becomes sort of more resilient towards revolutions, things like that. And the inverse holds true as well.
Yes, if your pops are unable to make ends meet, if you're, let's say, doing actions that only influence and support the richer aristocrats, your lower strata, your laborers, your machinists, your workmen, may try a revolution. We've seen it at the time period and many times throughout history.
Yeah, and it's certain goods become unavailable or fail, or even trade policies and things like that shift, and suddenly these needs that the pops have become much more expensive, and there you go. So the cost of the pops' needs, though, is only one part of the equation. The other bit is how much money they have to spend, right?
Correct. The pops' needs are, in this case, the demands, and the supply can only be met by their wages that they receive in employment.
Right.
Those wages are set by their places of employment. If they're working in a factory or a basic industry building, those will be setting wages based on the price of the goods that they produce. Because all businesses at this time are trying to operate for a profit. They will try...
At this time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's we'll go into the economic theory another time. There's a larger debate there. They're trying to maximize their profit by selling their goods. And that maximum profit they can achieve is how they base their wage rate.
Right.
And so they will constantly update wages on whether or not they can reach a full employment based on the price of the goods available. And your pops will use that wage to buy the goods in the market that they have either produced or has been produced by other pops that they need.
Right, right. That wage also, this is how you make money, right? This is one way that you can make money, at least as a country.
Yes.
You don't actually make money like selling goods or trading goods. You make money off of taxing the economy that you have built up.
Correct. The easiest way to gain money is to tax the wages of your people. But that's not the only one. You can do certain taxes such as I said, the income-based tax. There's multiple things. You can specialize that to be a heavier poor tax or a richer tax in some form of progressive order. You can do a poll tax or a per capita tax, which was very controversial at the time and is even more controversial nowadays, which is you exist in my country, thus you owe us money for that.
Yeah. This is kind of tied to the serfdom economies of some countries too.
Yes. And as well, there is the ability to customize based on your economy a consumption-based tax. This is one of the most utilized or sort of short-term tax-based policy of governments at the time, which is I want to encourage the consumption of X good, so I'll lower taxes on it, or I will raise taxes because everyone's buying this and I want to get in on this.
Yeah.
The
And sin taxes too,
Yes.
right? Like we don't want anyone to buy liquor, so
Well,
let's tax the heck out of liquor.
It's not
Very
even
common.
just sin taxes. The tax on tea actually funded most of the British Empire at one point. It was around 30% of its revenue was just the consumption tax on tea alone. So you can set consumption-based taxes on a basket of goods to your economy.
Yep.
And it will have repercussions as such. In some cases, if they're historically, if the British are obsessed with tea, they'll keep buying it.
Yeah.
But if you tax the basics, the prices will go up, and your pops may become unhappy because of that,
Right.
because they're not able to meet their needs.
Yeah. Exactly. And the goods you choose to tax is going to have a big impact on what part of the population is going to dislike this or be affected by this, right? And the same thing with the other kinds of income taxes. Like they're all laws, so you can choose to abolish income taxes if you want to, and certain segments of your population are going to be very, very happy about that.
Yes, you could abolish income taxes and focus more on just taxing the income of the buildings themselves as dividends and seeing that trickle into your treasury as such.
Yep. Another factor that's really important for the era is trade, right?
Yes.
So in Victoria 3, we permit for both import and export, and this is market to market, right? So
yes, it has the potential to be beneficial, or it can be another tool of diplomacy, a weapon of war by another means. You can trade with allies, gain the resources as you're not able to have. If you don't have a domestic source of iron, you can trade with a partner and gain that.
yeah, that's kind of a very basic, I need this thing, import it.
Yes, that's one of the easiest ways to gain it, and then of course you'd be reliant upon them to sustain that part of the trade.
Yeah.
But you can also use it in a sort of dastardly way, as if you are noticing that the AI or even another player is doing a very singular focused economy, that they're doing a single resource that is the bedrock of theirs. You can undercut them.
Right.
You can start exporting that good yourself if you have a competitive advantage in it.
Yeah.
And destroy the underpinnings of their economy while boosting your own.
Yeah. No, exactly. This is a way that you can really manipulate prices throughout the world, right? And compete peacefully with other nations.
Yes, it's just a war by another means.
Yeah. But yeah, your ability to do that depends on the size of your economy. And, it's not going to be good for your pops either to just I have this huge furniture in this manufacturing industry. I'm going to sell all my furniture to France, right? That might destroy France's economy. It's also going to affect the pops at home that need to buy furniture.
Yes,
right?
you're going to have to balance that, the needs of your domestic economy versus what you're trying to achieve diplomatically, whether it be an agreeable sort with somebody else or a dastardly sort of trying to destroy them.
And finally, I want to talk a little bit about the different types of economic systems that you can run in Victoria 3. And this is definitely your area.
Yes. Yes. Unlike today, where we are more, I would say, concrete in what is our understanding of the economic system that is winning at the time, things were changing at this time period. We saw economies moving from a more national focused of the only economy I care about is the domestic one to starting to talk about how it works in the international.
Yeah.
So they would move from a more traditional based economy to either an an isolationist one where they're protecting national industries, or the well-known one is the mercantile policies of Great Britain over history of how they would seek foreign markets and places to sell goods.
Yeah.
But also there's the systems that would come in the later period, which is, your free trade versus the command economies of socialism.
Yeah.
That is all still up for debate at this time, and you can change your economy based on those laws.
Right. So these are all laws that different segments of your country likes and other segments of your country doesn't like. And so as you're coming up with these new ideas, then there might be internal pressure to change them, or as famously in the case of Japan, there might be external pressure to open up an isolationist economy or accept a treaty port or something like that in order to facilitate trade. So again, like the economic system, it changes how your internal economy works and what you can do. It affects what you can do, but it's also something that can have an impact on your relations outside.
It can also change how you play through the game. If you are finding that you're being relatively successful with your economy as it is, if you're doing a large amount of trade and you see the political maneuvers of your pops and they're wishing to move towards isolationism, you will then have to make the decisions. Do I fight that pressure, or do I accept it and have to change the underpinnings of my entire economy?
Right. No, exactly. So we are out of time, and so we have to wrap up. But there's going to be a lot more dev diaries written on this. The first few are going to be on the economy, so you're going to get a lot more detail on how this works in the upcoming dev diaries. But for now, I want to emphasize a few things. The game is currently in alpha, so everything that we've said here is subject to change, but hopefully not much.
Hopefully not much.
So the economic system is the core of the game. It is what you're, as a smaller nation at least, it's what you're going to be engaging with the most. As you become more powerful and have to take more macro level decisions, you might find yourself interacting with it in a little bit more detached manner, right? Like you might make huge sweeping changes throughout your country rather than micromanaging each individual industry.
I mean, if you want, you can make sure that your laborer in one part of Russia is paid a similar rate to the laborer in another.
Yeah.
Or you can just care that the goods are getting to the market. That level of complexity and detail is there for you to basically go as far as you wish.
Yeah. And everything you do with that reverberates throughout the system, affecting political gameplay, affecting diplomatic gameplay, and we will learn a lot more about this in the upcoming dev diaries. And for right now, I just want to say like how excited I am to finally get to talk about this, because this has been a real journey.
Yeah, it's still astounding that we can finally say that we're working on Victoria 3.
Yep. So you'll hear much more from us in the future. And for now, goodbye.
Take care.